Bryan, it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining me today. One of the big issues at this show is the conversation about how the defense intelligence community handles data. What are some of the big challenges in the movement of the data and the security during the movement of the data that you're hearing people talking about here?
Yeah, no, this is a great question, and thanks for having me as always. So when we think about that challenge, there was a time where everything was stovepiped, right? There were jokes where you'd see like two desks next to one another, and yet they don't have no idea how to actually talk to one another, and all of those examples. That's not the world we live in anymore. When you think about what we're doing with our coalition partners, our Five Eyes community, even beyond when we get out to 20 Eyes or more, we need to have a better way of cross-communicating. Well, the issue is, historically, it would be fine if everything was self-contained within my organization, and even within our government, we have multiple organizations that are all operating semi-independently. As you would collect that data, as you classify that data, as you structure that data, you're doing that in the way that makes sense for your organization. That doesn't translate to interoperability. The world we live in now, we need to, as quickly and efficiently and securely as possible, have that cross-communication. The way that we're seeing that getting addressed is really through leveraging certain types of standardization and standardizing attributes as much as possible. So even though you're a part of a different organization than I am, we can speak a common language of who you are, what your entitlements are, what your access should be, and then we can build our authorization decisions and engines around that. So that on its face seems like a challenge. A lot of that's policy, but then from a technology enforcement, that shifts things away from directly authenticating into applications and authorization directly within applications to abstract into the federation layer and running that federation engine to help do that translation so that we can speak that common language. You could still authenticate back in your home agency or your home country, pass me that information, and then I can have a policy that I manage and control, even though I don't manage and control your identity, to be able to determine that access. That's what we're seeing. That's what I'm excited about. It's one of the things that we're talking about here at the show.
So you started out strategic and went toward tactical. Let's go farther toward the tactical aspect of it.
Right.
What do organizations need to do then from a tactical perspective to realize that strategic vision that you just laid out there, where the information is going back and forth, it's going back and forth securely, and everybody knows what everybody else is doing and what everybody else has?
So one of the biggest challenges to that, it's not necessarily the technical. We've gotten really good at the technical part of this. It's a policy and it's a culture change. Now, that means from a data owner perspective or an application owner perspective, you have to understand, yes, you're still responsible for protecting the data, but the data doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the organization, which sounds intuitive, but historically, application owners have been very protective. Hey, if that touches my application, then I'm in charge of it. Well, no, the organization is going to help you. We're going to abstract things away, and we're going to give you tool sets to augment your security, but we're going to do it in a way that standardizes so that it's better for that cross-interoperability. That is one of the larger barriers. Now, what's nice in the intelligence community is very close-knit, very easy for them to have that kind of joint policy of this is what we're doing, this is what we're standardizing around. They're far ahead of other areas of the government because they have that policy in place. We don't have something like that at the federal level for all the different departments to communicate within our own government, let alone external governments. So there's a lot to be learned about what the IC is doing and how they're tackling these challenges. So,
how does this field, how does this area look different, do you think, a year from now or 2 years from now as these ideas continue to evolve?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm hoping that we see is even more granular access policies when it comes to data itself. So it doesn't matter. So you look at the different models for zero trust, and yeah, of course, I got to use that buzzword, right? So we've got the data pillar on one side, the identity pillar on the other side within the system model that anchors it within the DoD model with 7 pillars. Data's central in the middle of that. Regardless, everything always revolves around data itself, and usually identity is pretty important there too. What we need to move towards, and what I hope to see in a few years, is we get a lot better at data tagging and understanding what that data is, what it's classified as, whether it's an unclassified side, but understanding the tagging around it, or in the classified side, the sensitivities. Once we have that in place, a lot of the technology that we already have within the identity side, we can then go in and really help differentiate and segregate that access to where you should only be gaining access to that information that is pertinent to you and your role that you're doing, versus a lot of the kind of, unfortunately, over-proliferation of data sharing that we have, especially on the unclassified side, because we don't have a way of really drilling in and saying, well, you should only be gaining access to this piece of information. We don't really understand the difference between that information and the other piece of information. We're collecting it at such an incredible rate that it's almost impossible to keep up. That's where, again, more buzzwords, that's where like AI and ML is probably going to help us to make that much, much faster. That as we're collecting that data, we get more meaningful tagging around it, and now we can put in more meaningful access control policies and open it up in an efficient and secure way to our partners that need to access that information as well.
Bryan, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, like I said, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.